It was a quiet Saturday morning in the small suburban neighborhood. The sun was just beginning to rise, spilling soft golden light across the neatly lined houses and perfectly trimmed lawns. Everything looked calm and peaceful. But little did anyone know, that peace was about to be broken by one very strict neighbor and a very fast Mustang. Michael Thompson, a tall man with a strong build and a calm face, stepped out of his garage. His eyes glimmered with pride as he looked at his shiny, cherry-red Mustang parked in the driveway. It wasn't just any car, it was a classic, and it had been in his family for years. Michael's son, Tommy, was standing next to him, bouncing on his heels with excitement. "Dad! Can I drive it today?" Tommy asked, his eyes wide with hope. Michael smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Slow down, champ. First, we'll go through some safety rules. This car isn't just any car, it's special. You have to respect it." Tommy nodded eagerly, barely able to contain his excitement. The Mustang was the dream car of any teenager. Its shiny red paint reflected the morning sun like a jewel, and the roar of its engine was music to any car lover's ears. Tommy had been waiting for this day for months, and now it had finally arrived. What Michael didn't know, however, was that someone was watching. Someone who always found a reason to complain, someone who thought rules were more important than people. Her name was Karen, but everyone in the neighborhood called her HOA Karen. She was the kind of neighbor who knew everyone's business, and she loved to enforce rules, sometimes rules that didn't even exist. From her window across the street, Karen's sharp eyes spotted the Mustang. Her lips curled into a disapproving frown. She didn't like loud cars. She didn't like excitement. And she definitely didn't like anyone breaking her rules. She grabbed her phone as she muttered to herself, "They think they can just do whatever they want, not in my neighborhood." Michael noticed Karen looking at them, but he didn't worry. He had seen her glare at cars, dogs, kids playing, and even garden decorations. She was the type of neighbor who lived to complain. But today, something told him this would be more than a simple glare. "Dad, hurry! I want to try it!" Tommy shouted, hopping from one foot to another. Michael laughed softly. "Patience, son. First, I'll show you how to adjust the mirrors, then we'll go over the controls. It's important you know everything before you start the engine." Tommy nodded, but he couldn't stop glancing across the street. Karen was still there, staring at them like a hawk. He didn't understand why she cared so much, but he knew better than to ask. Michael always told him, some people make rules for fun, not for reason. As Michael helped Tommy with the seatbelt and mirrors, Karen stomped out of her house. She carried a clipboard and a frown that looked permanent. She marched toward the Thompson house like she was on a mission. "Good morning, Karen," Michael said, trying to be polite. Karen didn't answer. She just stood there, tapping her pen on the clipboard and glancing at the Mustang. "Do you know the HOA rules about cars in the driveway?" she asked sharply. Michael raised an eyebrow. "I'm not aware of any rules being broken, Karen. We're on our property." Karen's frown deepened. "This car is too loud. The engine will disturb the peace of the neighborhood. I might have to call the authorities if this continues." Tommy's excitement froze. "Dad, are you?" he whispered nervously. Michael placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Don't worry, Tommy. Let's just enjoy our morning." But Karen wasn't backing down. She turned around and shouted toward her house, presumably on the phone. Michael couldn't hear her words, but the way she waved her arms suggested she was complaining loudly. Tommy looked at the Mustang and then at Karen. "She's really serious, huh?" he asked quietly. Michael nodded. "Yes, she is. Some people think rules are more important than happiness. But we'll handle it calmly. That's the best way." Karen's eyes narrowed as she watched Michael and Tommy carefully get into the car. She crossed her arms and muttered something about neighborhood safety under her breath. Her mouth was set in a hard line, she wasn't going to let this slide without a fight. Michael turned the key and the Mustang roared to life. The engine growled, echoing through the quiet street. Tommy's eyes sparkled, and he couldn't hide his smile. Karen gasped, putting her hands over her mouth. "Too loud! "This is too loud," she screamed. "I'm calling the cops." Michael glanced at his son and then back at Karen, his face calm. "Karen, there's no need to call anyone. We're just taking a short drive. No harm done." But Karen wasn't listening. She pulled out her phone and started dialing 911. Tommy's excitement wavered, and he looked nervously at his dad. Michael put the car in park and smiled at Tommy. "Son, sometimes people make big deals over small things. Don't let it ruin your day. Let's just focus on us." Tommy nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad. But she really seems serious. What if she calls the police?" Michael chuckled quietly, hiding a secret he had never revealed to anyone outside the family. "Well, let's just say, if she does, she might regret it." Tommy tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Michael smiled mysteriously, and the sound of the Mustang engine filled the air, louder this time, making the neighbors' windows rattle. Karen's frown turned to horror. She was about to find out she had underestimated the wrong family. As the camera of the story in the audience's mind would zoom in, it would catch Tommy gripping the steering wheel, excited, nervous, and thrilled. Michael leaned back slightly, calm as ever, while Karen ran inside to make her phone call. Little did anyone know, the quiet suburban Saturday was about to become a showdown. And the neighborhood was about to learn one very important lesson: never mess with the wrong family, and never underestimate a police chief, especially when his son wants to drive a Mustang. The tension hung in the air, thick and heavy, as Karen's voice echoed faintly from inside her house. Tommy glanced at his dad, a mixture of fear and excitement on his face. Michael gave him a reassuring nod. "Ready, son?" he asked. Tommy grinned. "Ready!" And with that, the Mustang was no longer just a car. It was the spark that would ignite a clash with HOA Karen, one that nobody in the neighborhood would forget. The morning had started peacefully, but it was about to get very, very interesting. After the Mustang's engine roared to life, a strange calm fell over the neighborhood. At least, it seemed calm. Inside the Thompson house, Michael and Tommy were going over the Mustang's controls again. Tommy's hands were shaking with excitement as he learned the gear shift, the mirrors, and the pedals. His heart raced faster than the car's engine, and Michael couldn't help but smile. But across the street, Karen wasn't calm. Not even close. She was pacing back and forth like a storm about to hit. Her phone was clenched tightly in her hand, and she kept muttering rules under her breath. Noise. Safety. Neighborhood order. This is chaos. Absolute chaos. She had always loved the idea of being the neighborhood's enforcer. Complaints were her hobby, and she kept a mental list of every infraction she thought existed. Some were real, some she made up. Today, though, she had found her biggest target yet, a Mustang. A loud, shiny, rule-breaking Mustang. Karen dialed 911, but before she could speak, a strange thing happened. Across the street, one of the neighbors, Mr. Patel, stepped out of his house and smiled awkwardly at her. "Good morning, Karen," he said cheerfully. Karen shot him a glare sharp enough to break glass. "Do you see that car? That loud machine? They are disturbing the peace." Mr. Patel raised an eyebrow. "It's Saturday morning, and it's a car in their driveway?" Karen huffed. "Excuses. They have no respect for the neighborhood." Before she could continue, the Thompsons' driveway became the stage for another little twist. Tommy, curious and brave, rolled the Mustang forward just a tiny bit, enough for the car to shine under the morning sun. Michael wasn't worried, it was a small movement, but Karen gasped like she'd seen a crime. "Stop! You can't do that. You're violating every rule in the HOA book," she shouted, waving her hands dramatically. Tommy froze. "Dad, what's she going to do?" Michael gave him a calm, almost mischievous smile. "Let her think she's in control. Just focus on the car, son." Karen, meanwhile, was already on her phone. She raised her voice and spoke in the most serious tone she could muster. Yes, they are breaking all the rules. You need to come immediately." This is an emergency. On the other side of the neighborhood, people were starting to notice. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, and a few even came outside to watch. The drama was like a live show, starring HOA Karen and the Thompson family. "What's going on?" whispered little Timmy from the house next door, pointing at the scene. "She's going to call the cops," his sister replied, giggling. Karen's voice grew louder. "This is unacceptable. I've lived here for 20 years, and I will not let chaos take over my peaceful street." Meanwhile, Michael and Tommy stayed calm. Michael knew that Karen's biggest weapon was fear, and she loved to make small things seem huge. He had a plan. He had to let her overplay her hand. Tommy finally took a deep breath. "Dad, she's really serious. She's calling. What if the police come?" Michael leaned closer to him. "Tommy, remember what I taught you, don't react to people who want drama. Stay calm, do what's right, and let them run themselves into trouble." Tommy nodded slowly. He tried to focus on the Mustang's wheel, but his curiosity kept glancing at Karen. She was pacing now, muttering, and waving her phone like a magic wand. Then, something even more unexpected happened. Across the street, Mrs. Lopez, another neighbor, walked outside holding a cup of coffee. She watched Karen and then whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "Oh, here we go again. The Karen show." Karen spun around, shocked, then quickly glared at her. "This is serious," she shouted. "You don't understand the rules." Mrs. Lopez chuckled. "Maybe, but the rules don't include calling the cops on a kid learning to drive." Karen's face turned red. She muttered something under her breath, but the neighbors had already noticed. Some were stifling laughs, some were shaking their heads, and some were secretly rooting for the Mustang. Inside the car, Tommy finally relaxed slightly, gripping the wheel with both hands. "Dad, everyone's looking at us," he whispered nervously. Michael smiled, eyes calm. "Good. Let them watch. Let them see who stays calm and who panics. That's all that matters." Karen wasn't done yet. She took a step closer, tapping her pen aggressively against the clipboard. She glared at Michael. "If you don't stop that car, I'm calling the authorities again. This is serious. You think you can just ignore the rules?" Michael tilted his head, pretending to consider her words seriously. "Karen, we are on our property. We're not disturbing anyone. The engine is normal. Nothing illegal is happening here." Karen's eyes widened as she realized she was running out of arguments. But she wasn't willing to give up. Not today. She raised her phone again and started to dial, muttering to herself, "They think they can ignore me, they'll see." And then came the moment that made the whole neighborhood hold its breath. The Mustang revved slightly, the engine's roar echoing through the street. It wasn't loud, not really, but Karen's reaction made it seem like an earthquake. She shrieked, threw her phone up, and waved her hands like a conductor of chaos. From the crowd of neighbors watching, a few snickered. The tension was building. Everyone sensed that this wasn't just a complaint anymore, it was going to be a full-blown confrontation. Tommy looked at his dad, wide-eyed. "Dad, this is getting out of hand." Michael put a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Sometimes, son, people create their own drama. Let's just stay calm and let it happen. You'll see things are about to get very interesting." Karen, completely unaware of what she was about to discover, continued pacing, calling, and waving her arms. She had no idea that the very person she was trying to report had powers she could never imagine. She had no idea that her plan was about to backfire in ways she could never predict. The quiet street had become a stage for chaos, suspense, and a little bit of comedy. The Mustang sat there, shiny and calm, like it knew its role in the coming storm. Tommy gripped the wheel tighter, excitement mixing with fear. And somewhere deep inside Michael, a tiny smile appeared. He was ready. Karen was about to learn, the hard way, that she had underestimated the wrong family. The morning sun climbed higher, spilling light across the quiet street. Everything looked calm, but the tension was thick enough to touch. Across the street, HOA Karen was pacing faster now, phone pressed tightly against her ear. Her voice was sharp, loud, and very insistent. Yes. They are breaking rules. The car is loud. My neighborhood is in danger, she shouted. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, trying not to laugh but failing miserably. It was clear that Karen had turned this quiet Saturday into her personal drama show. Inside the Mustang, Tommy gripped the steering wheel with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. His dad, Michael, leaned back in the driver's seat, calm and collected. There was something almost mischievous in his eyes, a tiny smile playing at the corners of his lips. Tommy noticed it but didn't know what it meant. Dad, she called the cops, Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible over the engine's hum. Michael nodded slowly. I know, son. And that's why we stay calm. Let's just wait and see what happens. Meanwhile, Karen had completed her call. She hung up and turned toward the Thompson house, her eyes blazing with satisfaction. Finally, she muttered. Justice will be served. The authorities will put an end to this madness. She had no idea that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. A few minutes later, red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street. A patrol car slowly pulled up in front of the Thompson driveway. Neighbors gasped. Some stepped outside, craning their necks to see what was happening. Some whispered, she really did it this time. Karen's face lit up with glee. She straightened her shoulders, clutching her clipboard tightly. There! The cops are here! I knew it, she said proudly, as if she had won the lottery. Tommy's eyes widened. Dad, the police are here. What do we do? Michael chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that made Tommy both nervous and curious. Just stay calm. Watch carefully. The patrol car stopped, and two uniformed officers stepped out. They were professional, polite, and serious. They looked at the Mustang, at Tommy, and then at Karen, who was practically bouncing with excitement. Good morning, officers, Karen began, pointing at the car. They are breaking the rules. The engine is loud. The neighborhood is at risk. One of the officers raised an eyebrow, clearly a little confused. Ma'am, can you clarify what law is being broken? Karen's face turned red. The rules of the neighborhood. The HOA rules. This is unacceptable. The officers exchanged a glance. It was clear they weren't used to handling HOA emergencies. One of them scratched his head. Ma'am, we usually handle crimes, emergencies, not driveway noise complaints. Karen gasped, waving her hands dramatically. This is an emergency. The neighborhood's peace is in danger. Michael slowly got out of the Mustang, his hands raised slightly in a calm, non-threatening way. He smiled politely at the officers. Good morning, officers. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Karen froze. Her eyes narrowed. You're the one who owns the car? You're ignoring the rules? Michael's smile didn't waver. I'm the owner, yes. And no rules have been broken. We're on private property, and this car is legal. That's all. Karen's jaw dropped. But, she couldn't form another sentence. She pointed at him like he had grown horns. This is unacceptable. Then, Michael took a deep breath and said calmly, almost casually, Officers. I'm actually the police chief of this city. Everything is under control. There's no crime here. Time seemed to freeze. Karen's eyes widened so much it was almost comical. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The officers blinked, momentarily speechless. Even the neighbors had to step back, stunned. Tommy couldn't believe his ears. Dad, you're the police chief? Michael nodded, smiling faintly. Yes, son. That's why we stay calm. Karen's hand trembled, and her clipboard nearly fell. She had been so sure of her victory, so confident that she had the law on her side. And now, she realized she had just walked into the wrong driveway, at the wrong time, with the wrong family. One of the officers stepped forward, giving Karen a polite but firm look. "Ma'am, we'll take note of your complaint, but there's nothing illegal happening here. You may want to reconsider before calling us next time." Karen's face twisted in disbelief. She muttered something about abuse of power, but nobody was listening. The neighbors were trying hard not to laugh, and Tommy's grin was impossible to hide. Michael leaned down, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. "See, Tommy? Calmness and patience always work. People who overreact, well, they usually get surprised." Karen turned and stormed back to her house, muttering to herself, red-faced and defeated. The neighbors whispered, giggling behind curtains and fences. Some were clearly enjoying the unexpected drama of a Karen versus police chief showdown. Tommy finally let out a laugh, the kind of laugh that had been trapped for weeks under nervous excitement. "Dad, that was amazing. She had no idea." Michael chuckled softly, opening the Mustang's door. "And she still doesn't, son. But that's okay. Sometimes, it's better for people to learn lessons the hard way." The Mustang sat there, gleaming under the sun, more than just a car now. It was a symbol of patience, cleverness, and calm control. And as the streets slowly returned to quiet, one thing was certain: HOA Karen had seriously underestimated the Thompson family. The stage was set. The tension had been released, but the story wasn't over yet. Karen might retreat for now, but she was already planning her next move, and the neighborhood would soon discover just how persistent she could be. And Tommy? Well, he had just realized that driving the Mustang today might come with more excitement than he had ever imagined. The morning had turned into a quiet battlefield. The Mustang gleamed in the driveway like a trophy, Tommy's grin stretched from ear to ear, and Michael remained as calm as a lake at sunrise. But Karen? Karen was in full storm mode. Back in her house, she slammed the door behind her with a force that made the walls shake. Her face was red, her hair slightly messy from pacing, and her hands were trembling. This wasn't just a small annoyance anymore, this was personal. She had called the cops, and nothing had gone her way. How dare they ignore her? "This is unacceptable," she muttered to herself, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. "The rules are being broken, the neighborhood is being disrespected, and I must take action." Karen's fingers flew over her phone again. She wasn't just calling the authorities this time. No, she was taking things to the next level. She drafted emails to the HOA board, sent texts to neighbors, and even posted a warning in the community app, complete with exaggerated claims about the Mustang being a public disturbance. Meanwhile, across the street, the neighbors were buzzing with curiosity. Little kids peeked over fences. Adults whispered behind their hands, trying not to laugh at Karen's dramatic performance. One neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, had even come outside with a bag of popcorn. "Ladies and gentlemen," he whispered to Mrs. Patel, "grab your seats. The Karen show is about to get interesting." Karen stormed back outside, clipboard in hand, determined to confront the Thompsons directly. She stomped across the street like a general leading an army. "Michael Thompson," she yelled, pointing at him. "This is not over. You cannot just flaunt the rules and expect no consequences." Tommy, still sitting in the Mustang, leaned over to his dad nervously. "Dad, she's really angry. What do we do?" Michael smiled faintly, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Son, watch and learn. Sometimes, people escalate because they want attention, not because they're right." Karen had gathered a small crowd of neighbors at this point. Some were curious, some amused, and some quietly taking videos for social media. She didn't care. She had an audience, and that fueled her fire. "You think you're clever," she shouted at Michael. "You think you can ignore me? I have the HOA, the authorities, and the entire neighborhood behind me." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Really, Karen? Because from what I can see, most of the neighborhood is just watching." Karen's face turned bright red. "How dare you mock me," she screeched. "This is serious. The Mustang is loud. The engine is illegal. I should have a citation right now." Tommy couldn't help but giggle. The situation was absurd. His dad, calm as ever, and Karen, frantic and over the top. It was like a real-life cartoon. Karen wasn't done yet. She had one more trick up her sleeve. She ran back into her house and returned with a megaphone. Yes, a megaphone. She aimed it directly at the Mustang and shouted, "This is your final warning. Stop immediately, or face consequences." The neighbors erupted in whispers, some laughing so hard they had to cover their mouths. A few even clapped quietly, as if this was a performance. Michael looked at Tommy and said softly, "Son, always remember, don't let someone's anger control you. Stay calm, stay focused, and let them make the mistakes themselves." Karen, oblivious to the laughter and whispers, continued her tirade through the megaphone. "I've lived here for decades. I've seen everything. And I will not allow chaos in my neighborhood." Then, as she raised the megaphone for another speech, a sudden honk came from the Mustang. Tommy, trying to practice the horn, had accidentally pressed it. The sound was sharp, loud, and perfectly timed. Karen jumped, shrieked, and nearly dropped the megaphone. The neighbors gasped, then laughed out loud. Even Michael couldn't suppress a small chuckle. Karen, now completely flustered, stomped back into her house, muttering threats to the HOA, the police, and anyone who would listen. She had escalated, yes, but she had also humiliated herself in front of the entire street. Tommy turned to his dad, eyes wide. "Dad, she's really gone crazy. Is she going to come back?" Michael chuckled softly. "She probably will. People like her rarely back down. But that's okay. We've done nothing wrong, and we're calm. That's what matters." The Mustang sat there, gleaming in the sun, almost smugly. Tommy finally started to relax, realizing that his dad had handled the situation perfectly. Karen's energy was high, but it was all smoke and noise, nothing real. And somewhere in the chaos, Michael knew this wasn't the end. Karen's next move would be unpredictable. She might escalate even further. She might try to involve more neighbors. But one thing was certain, no matter what she did, the Thompsons had the upper hand. Calm, patience, and a little cleverness were always stronger than anger and drama. The neighborhood had learned a valuable lesson that day. HOA Karen could scream, stomp, and shout, but the Mustang, the Thompsons, and the quiet confidence of a police chief were untouchable. The day was far from over, and the Mustang was ready for the next chapter. Karen had set the stage for more chaos, and the next move would be even more dramatic. The afternoon sun had climbed high, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban street. The Mustang sat gleaming in the driveway, a perfect reflection of the chaos it had caused. Tommy was still inside, practically vibrating with excitement, and Michael stood calmly next to the car, hands folded behind his back. Karen had retreated inside her house, but it was clear she wasn't done. From the window, she was glaring across the street, muttering about injustice, neighborhood rules, and the utter audacity of the Thompsons. She was plotting her next move, escalation number 3. Then, she saw the unexpected. Michael casually walked toward the Mustang and opened the driver's door for Tommy. He smiled at his son and said, "Ready to take it for a proper drive, son?" Tommy's eyes widened. "Dad, are we really going to?" Michael nodded. "Yes. But remember, safety first. Respect the car. Respect the road. And, most importantly, ignore the drama." Karen gasped from her window. "He's going to drive it? He's breaking every rule I've ever made up." She grabbed her phone and started dialing again, fury in her eyes. Before she could finish, the sound of another vehicle caught everyone's attention. A black SUV slowly rolled onto the street, with its emergency lights flashing, not too bright, just enough to signal authority. Karen's jaw dropped. "The police, they're coming back," she whispered, panic in her voice. The SUV stopped in front of the Thompson driveway. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the street carefully. Karen practically danced with excitement, sure that justice was finally arriving for her. But then, Michael stepped forward. Calm. Confident. Smiling just slightly. And he spoke with a voice that made Karen freeze in her tracks. Officers, good afternoon. I believe you're here because of a complaint from my neighbor, Karen. The officers looked at him, puzzled. Sir, yes, we got a call. Michael took a deep breath. I'm the police chief of the city. Everything here is under control. There is no crime, no disturbance, and nothing illegal is happening. The Mustang is perfectly safe. And the driver of my son is under supervision. Time seemed to slow. Karen's eyes widened. Her hands trembled as she gripped the window frame. You're the chief? She stammered, her voice cracking with disbelief. Michael nodded calmly. Yes, Karen. And I suggest you reconsider calling authorities over neighborhood complaints in the future. It can get awkward. Karen's face turned bright red, and she stumbled backward. Her clipboard nearly fell as she realized that the person she had been shouting at, reporting, and plotting against was not just any neighbor. He was the chief of police. The authority she had tried to summon was already sitting in his own driveway, smiling at her. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains and fences, some laughing quietly, some whispering in shock. The kids across the street were clapping softly, thrilled by the live drama unfolding. Karen's reputation as the all-powerful enforcer of HOA rules was crumbling in real time. I didn't know. Karen sputtered, trying to regain composure. Michael raised a hand politely. It's okay, Karen. I understand misunderstandings happen. But maybe next time, consider checking facts before escalating. Tommy leaned back in the Mustang, eyes wide. Dad, that was perfect. Michael smiled at him. Patience and calm always win, son. And sometimes, letting people reveal their own mistakes is the best lesson. Karen, still flustered, muttered something about abuse of power under her breath. But even she knew deep down that she had been completely outmaneuvered. She had underestimated Michael, and now the entire neighborhood had seen it. The officers, realizing the situation, nodded politely at Michael. Understood, Chief. We'll log the call and leave it at that. Karen slumped against her window, defeated. The megaphone, the shouting, the dramatic gestures, it was all for nothing. The neighbors whispered, some giggling, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The Mustang sat there, innocent yet triumphant, while Tommy beamed from the driver's seat, feeling victorious in his own small way. Michael leaned down to Tommy and whispered, remember this, son, confidence, calm, and knowing when to act makes all the difference. And sometimes, people will overreact no matter what. That's why we stay grounded. Karen finally retreated into her house, muttering complaints to the walls, her plan ruined. The street returned to a quiet hum, but the story was far from over. Karen had been humiliated, yes, but she was also plotting. And Tommy? He had just learned an unforgettable lesson. Driving a Mustang was fun, but having a calm, clever dad could turn chaos into victory. The Mustang roared to life once again as Michael started the car. The engine sounded stronger than ever, echoing down the street. And Karen, inside her house, flinched at the sound. She had realized something important that day: no amount of yelling, shouting, or threats could ever outmatch patience, calm, and a little bit of cleverness. The neighborhood had witnessed a dramatic showdown, and one thing was clear: HOA Karen had finally met her match. The street had never been this alive. Neighbors peeked from windows, some even leaning over fences to get a better look at the Thompson driveway. Karen had retreated into her house, but her fury and embarrassment echoed down the street like a low thunder. Inside her living room, she sat on the edge of her couch, clutching her clipboard like it was a lifeline. How could this happen? She muttered. I had the law on my side. I had the HOA. Her voice broke as she realized she had no power left. The police chief himself had turned her complaint into a public spectacle. Outside, the neighborhood kids ran around, reenacting the Karen versus Mustang drama. Tommy's friends giggled as they whispered about how HOA Karen had been completely outsmarted by a dad in his car. Even some of the adults couldn't hide smirks. Mrs. Patel, standing by her gate, whispered to Mr. Jenkins, I've never seen someone fall apart like that. She looked like a cartoon villain. Mr. Jenkins chuckled. And she deserves it. All that shouting in the megaphone, priceless. Back in the Thompson driveway, Michael stood by the Mustang, leaning casually against the hood. Tommy jumped out, still buzzing with excitement. Dad, everyone is talking about what happened. Even the kids are laughing. Michael smiled calmly. Let them talk, son. People will always gossip. What matters is how we act, not how loud others are. Karen, however, was not ready to give up completely. After a few minutes of sulking, she stormed outside, clipboard in hand, determined to save her pride. She started talking loudly to the neighbors, trying to explain herself. I was only trying to protect the neighborhood. This is serious. You all should respect the rules. The neighbors, trying to hide their laughter, exchanged glances. Some whispered, she really thinks anyone cares now? Meanwhile, Tommy walked over to the sidewalk, holding a small toy car in his hand. Mom says I can't drive this Mustang around the block today, he joked, but I can definitely play with the toy version. Just don't tell Karen. Karen's eyes narrowed. That child. The audacity. Then, in a twist of comedy, Mrs. Lopez from across the street leaned over and called out, Karen, maybe you should write a new HOA rule, no yelling at kids learning to drive. Karen's face turned bright red, and she scurried back into her house, muttering about disrespectful neighbors. She realized she had lost not just the argument, but also any shred of dignity in front of the entire street. The neighbors couldn't stop whispering and laughing. Some even started sharing their phones and filming the moment for social media. Karen's dramatic meltdown became the neighborhood story of the week. Tommy looked up at his dad, eyes shining. Dad, did you see everyone watching? They all saw Karen lose. Michael ruffled his son's hair. Yes, Tommy. And remember, we didn't have to yell, argue, or act crazy. Calmness and patience always win. That's the real lesson. Even though Karen had been humiliated, Michael didn't gloat. He knew the key wasn't revenge, it was about showing how to handle drama gracefully. Meanwhile, HOA Karen, sitting in her house, plotted her next move silently. She had been defeated, yes, but she was not done. She would think of a new plan, a new way to control the neighborhood, a new way to regain her authority. But for today she had learned a valuable lesson: some neighbors cannot be intimidated. The Mustang sat there, still gleaming under the afternoon sun. Tommy climbed back in, grinning. Dad, can we drive now? Michael smiled, opening the door. Yes, son. Let's go for a drive. Calmly. And enjoy the victory, you earned it. As the Mustang rolled down the driveway, the sound of its engine was a quiet celebration, not a threat. The neighborhood had witnessed a lesson in patience, cleverness, and calm confidence. HOA Karen may have planned chaos, but in the end, the day belonged to the Thompsons. And as the sun began to lower in the sky, casting warm golden light across the street, the neighbors knew one thing for sure: HOA Karen would never forget the day she tried to stop a Mustang and ended up being outsmarted by a police chief and his clever son. The sun was slowly setting, casting warm orange and pink hues across the quiet suburban street. The Mustang's engine had quieted, parked safely in the Thompson driveway. Tommy hopped out of the car, his shoes squeaking slightly on the pavement, his face glowing with excitement. Today had been nothing short of an adventure. Michael closed the Mustang's door, leaning against the hood with that calm, confident smile that had carried them through the chaos. Tommy turned to him, eyes wide and sparkling. Dad, that was incredible. I mean, everyone saw what happened. Michael nodded, ruffling his son's hair. Yes, Tommy. And remember this: people like Karen thrive on drama, anger, and overreaction. Staying calm, thinking clearly, and doing the right thing always wins in the end. Tommy grinned. So, yelling and panicking doesn't help? Michael chuckled. Exactly. It only makes things worse. Calm wins every time. And a little cleverness doesn't hurt either. Across the street, HOA Karen peeked from her window, fuming quietly. She had retreated into her house after the public humiliation, muttering about new plans, new rules, and a future chance to reclaim her authority. But for now, she had been defeated. The neighbors had seen it all. Her megaphone, her shouting, her dramatic gestures, they had all been for nothing. Mrs. Lopez leaned over the fence, smirking. Well, I think we all learned a lesson today. Calmness beats chaos, and apparently, a Mustang beats HOA Karen. Tommy laughed so hard he almost tripped over the curb. Yeah. And Dad, you were amazing. She didn't even know you're the police chief. Michael smiled, looking down at his son. Sometimes, son, the best power isn't the loudest voice. It's staying calm, knowing your strengths, and letting others overplay their hands. Karen taught us one thing: people will always try to control others, but cleverness and patience are stronger than anger and rules. The neighbors started returning to their homes, still whispering and giggling about the events. Some kids reenacted the Mustang chase, some adults shared stories about HOA Karen's wild antics, and a few even gave the Thompsons discreet applause as a nod to their victory. Tommy looked at the Mustang, then back at his dad. Can we take it for a real drive now? Michael laughed softly, opening the car door. Yes, son. Let's go. But remember, the Mustang is more than just a car. It's a symbol of responsibility, patience, and knowing how to stay calm under pressure. As Tommy climbed into the driver's seat and Michael buckled in next to him, the Mustang roared to life, not as a threat, but as a celebration. The engine's sound echoed down the street, but this time, it carried confidence, pride, and victory. The neighborhood had seen the chaos, the drama, and the ultimate triumph of calm and cleverness. From her window, Karen watched, shaking her head. She knew she had been outsmarted, and deep down, she realized it wasn't just about the Mustang, it was about learning a lesson she hadn't expected. But Karen's stubbornness would make her try again another day. For now, though, the day belonged to the Thompsons. Michael looked over at Tommy, giving him a small nod. Remember this day, son. Life will throw people like Karen at you, people who try to control, shout, and intimidate. But if you stay calm, use your brain, and act wisely, you will always come out on top. Tommy grinned, gripping the steering wheel. I won't forget, Dad. And, next time, maybe Karen won't even try. Michael laughed, the sound calm and warm. Maybe. Or maybe she will. Either way, we'll handle it. As the Mustang drove slowly down the street, the sun dipped behind the houses, casting long shadows and painting the sky in brilliant colors. The day had started with tension, chaos, and drama, but it ended with laughter, lessons, and a little bit of victory. The neighborhood would remember this day for a long time. HOA Karen had tried to control the street. She had tried to intimidate a father and his son. But in the end, calmness, patience, and a little cleverness had won. And Tommy? Well, he had driven a Mustang, witnessed a neighbor's meltdown, and learned one of the most important lessons of his young life. Sometimes, the quiet heroes are the ones who stay calm. Sometimes, the loudest drama ends in silence. And sometimes, just sometimes, a Mustang and a clever dad can teach an entire neighborhood a lesson in patience, wit, and courage. The Mustang purred down the street, a soft engine echoing through the neighborhood, and the Thompsons knew one thing for certain: victory was calm, clever, and unforgettable.